A warm welcome to the world today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up within the hour. Ukraine agrees on terms of major minerals deal with the U.S. as President Zelensky is expected in Washington on Friday. U.S. President Donald Trump announces $5 million visa program gold card for pathway to U.S. citizenship. Plus, Canada's Liberal Party holds debate as candidates look to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The World Today begins right now. Welcome again, everyone. Ukraine has agreed the terms of a major minerals deal with the United States. Prime Minister Shimhal says it's a final deal. A version of the deal was hammered out during intense negotiations and adds that the U.S. supports Ukraine's efforts to obtain security guarantees. Media reports say Washington has dropped initial demands for a right to $500 billion in potential revenue from utilizing the natural resources, but has not given firm security guarantees, a key Ukrainian demand. Ukraine holds deposits of critical elements and minerals, including lithium and titanium, as well as a sizable coal, gas, oil and uranium deposits, supplies worth billions of dollars. According to Ukrainian government source, what has been agreed to at this stage are the initial terms of an agreement that includes the country's critical minerals and other resources. Reports suggest it will see the creation of a jointly owned fund, which would be used to rebuild critical infrastructure. Ukraine would contribute 50% of future proceeds from state-owned mineral resources, oil and gas to the fund, while the fund will invest in projects in Ukraine itself. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says he is expecting his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington to sign the deal this week after the two leaders exchanged strong words about each other. Without confirming that an agreement had been reached, Mr. Trump said that in return for the deal, Ukraine would get the right to fight on. Just last week, he described President Zelensky as a dictator and appeared to blame Ukraine, not Russia, for starting the war after the Ukrainian leader rejected U.S. demands and suggested that Mr. Trump was living in a disinformation space created by Russia.
I hear that. I hear that he's coming on Friday. Certainly, it's okay with me if he'd like to, and he would like to sign it together with me, and I understand that's a big deal, very big deal. And I think the American people, even if you look at polling, they're very happy because, you know, Biden was throwing money around like it's cotton candy, and it's a very big deal. It could be $1 trillion deal, it could be whatever, but it's rare earths and other things. So what we're doing is now we're saying, look, we want to be secured. We want to get that money back. We're helping a country through a very, very big problem, a problem like very few people have had. Shouldn't have had this problem because it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. So we have to straighten it out. But the American taxpayer now is going to get their money back plus $350 billion and lots of equipment, and military equipment, and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time.
On the war in Ukraine, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says a meeting with U.S. diplomats is due to hold in Istanbul on Thursday. Mr. Lavrov made this confirmation at a press conference in Qatar, where he announced that the two countries will discuss systemic problems in the operation of embassies. A possible meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin has been on the cards for a while after Mr. Trump called his Russian colleague to discuss negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. However, no date has been set. To U.S. Immigration Matters, the government has announced plans to sell $5 million gold card resident permits to foreigners, a program that will also come with a route to citizenship. The high dollar visa would replace the current EB-5 immigrant investor visa for foreign job creators, which the Commerce Secretary has slammed as a full of nonsense and a fraud. Describing the people he wanted to see apply, Mr. Trump told an Oval Office press conference they'll be wealthy and they'll be successful. According to U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, the Trump Gold Card is intended to replace EB-5 visas in 2 weeks, an investor visa that has existed for 35 years.
The Gold Card will bring in with it people that create jobs, very high-level people. I think companies will pay to get people in. For instance, you today graduate from the Wharton School of Finance or Harvard or Stanford or any college, and nobody knows if you can even go to work for a company. So Apple and all these companies that want to get people to be working for them will be able to buy a card, and for the people that are number one in their class at top schools, I see that as one of the things. But generally speaking, it'll be people with money and people that create jobs, and they won't have to pay any tax on income outside of the United States, which they're not paying right now. They're not citizens, but they'll have to pay if they create jobs in the United States. They'll pay full taxes like everybody else. So you're getting big taxpayers, big job producers, and we'll be able to sell maybe 1 million of these cards, maybe more than that. And if you add up the numbers, they're pretty good. As an example, 1 million cards would be worth $5 trillion. $5 trillion.
Wow.
And if you sell 10 million of the cards, that's a total of $50 trillion. Well, we have 35 trillion in debt. That'd be nice.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration is creating a registry for all people who are in the United States illegally, and those who don't self-report could face fines or prosecution. Immigration officials announced this week that everyone who is in the U.S. illegally must register, give fingerprints, and provide an address. The Department of Homeland Security cites a section of the Immigration and Nationality Act, the complex immigration law, as justification for the registration process, which would apply to anyone aged 14 and older. The announcement comes as the administration seeks to make good on campaign promises to carry out mass deportations of people in the country legally and seal the border to future asylum seekers. Let's get more on this from our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Maria Bird. Maria, great to see you again today.
Hello, how are you?
Right, I'm great. So what's the Department of Homeland Security's reason for creating this register?
Well, this register is really out of a promise from the campaign. The campaign stated that they would be dealing with illegal immigration into the United States. And as we know, there were major deportations in the first couple of weeks of the administration. And so this is a second step in the efforts to be able to address illegal immigration. And this registry is going to allow the administration to be able to probably easily access those individuals who are here illegally, finding out where they live. So it will cut down on the amount of time spent, financial resources spent on locating individuals that they are considering deporting back. And so this is definitely unprecedented, the first time we've seen something like this. And we are yet to see any formal legal action from the courts in relationship to this, but there's likely going to be additional information coming out of the courts regarding this, and specifically advocacy organizations that will be responding to this order as well.
Right, and this is pinned to the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is described as a complex immigration law, yet Homeland Security seems to be riding on this to carry out a major operation such as this. Is this likely to face any legal challenges?
Well, likely it could. We know that the executive orders and we know that many of the deportations have already faced legal challenges. And so it is highly likely that we will see some legal pieces as a result of this. We do know the president has cited a section within a previous immigration law that stated that people are supposed to have some sort of a registration. So this is supposedly going to enact that and to ensure that people, as they come in illegally, do register in this system. Obviously, there's great concern from individuals, specifically individuals that are already fearful about being deported back. And this is any individual over the age of 14 will be required to register.
Guarantee non-deportation.
Yes, and this does not state that the people will not be deported. It is being stated, though, that if one does not comply with this, they could be fined, imprisoned, and that would be further ramifications for that person if they did not register. So they're basically at this time stating that registration is required for those who are here illegally. It does not mean deportation, nor does it mean they'll be able to, at some point legally, have the right to be in the United States. But it does state that if a person does not register, not only deportation, but other acts could be afforded to them, such as imprisonment or punishment and fines.
Is there a timeline to this operation? When it's set to begin?
This is set to begin very soon. It's expected within the next week or so. Could be sooner, but very much in the next couple of weeks for sure. They're looking to have this up and ready for individuals to register. So the time is definitely imminent.
And there's more immigration news out of the United States. Tell us more about the government's plans to sell $5 million gold card resident permits that would scrap the 35-year EB-5. The president has very high projections running into trillions of dollars if this works out.
Yes, it's very interesting. This is the first time the U.S. has kind of looked at something like this, gold card access to the United States. We know that he has close relationships with Russia, several other countries that obviously we were expecting that will be purchasing some of these gold cards. And as he stated, the cost of the gold card is supposed to address some of the deficits the country is experiencing. But we've never seen something like this before, and also the request is that this will also drive business in the U.S. It will provide economic benefits, and so I think this is something new that many Americans are not very familiar with, and so wondering to see how this will all play out. And this is also too something that will be happening in the next week to 2 weeks.
Welcome back. After back-to-back debates in both English and French, the candidates to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as leader of the Liberal Party in Canada have made their case to voters. Card-holding Liberals will now choose between former Governor of Banks of Canada and England, Mark Carney, former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, House Government Leader Karina Gould, and businessman and former MP Frank Baylis. Whoever wins the vote on March 9 will become Canada's next Prime Minister and will lead the Liberals in the forthcoming general election, which must be held on or before October 20 of this year. A big focus of the debates has been how Canada should respond to U.S. President Donald Trump, who has threatened steep tariffs on America's northern neighbor and has suggested that Canada become the 51st state. The economy is also a major issue for voters, as well as support for Ukraine and NATO. Israeli and Hamas officials say the latest impasse in the Gaza ceasefire deal has been resolved by mediators. Israel had delayed the release of 600 Palestinian prisoners on Saturday in protests against what it said was the cruel treatment of Israeli hostages being handed over by Hamas, and said this was a serious violation of the deal. It's now expected that the prisoners will be freed, as well as another batch, possibly later on Wednesday or Thursday, in exchange for the return of the bodies of 4 hostages. That will clear the way for the U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff to visit the region. He has said that he wants Israel and Hamas to begin delayed talks on the second stage of the ceasefire. News of the breakthrough came as thousands of Israelis gathered in the central city of Rishon LeZion to watch the funeral procession of hostages Shiri Bibas and her two young sons, Ariel and Kofar, whose bodies were returned by Hamas last week. They were killed in captivity after being kidnapped during Hamas attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, which triggered the war in Gaza. In the meantime, rescued Israeli hostage Noah Agramani has called for the release of all remaining Hamas-held captives during her address to the UN Security Council in New York. This comes as the first phase of the ceasefire deal nears its expiry. Ms. Amagani stressed that there's no more time as the hostages are still in hell and everything must be done to bring all of them home. Her partner, Avinaton Orr, was captured alongside her at the Nova Music Festival on October 7. He remains held in Hamas captivity and is set to be released in the second phase of the ceasefire agreement. The second and third stages will now be negotiated, including a permanent ceasefire, the release of the remaining hostages, the return of bodies, a full Israeli withdrawal, and the long-term reconstruction of Gaza.
My name is Dara Gamani, and I was kidnapped by Hamas terrorists on October 7 from the Nova Music Festival with my partner, Avinatan Orr. I was taken hostage by force into Gaza, where I was in total fear, living in a nightmare. After 8 months in captivity, I was rescued by the Israeli soldiers. Being here with you today, it's a miracle. But I'm here today to tell, we have no time. As I speak, there is still 63 hostages in the nightmare, including my partner, Avinatan Orr. In fact, we believe that there is 24 hostages that are still alive. Many of them sent sight of life through released hostages. Our life cannot go on without them. The deal must go on in full, in completely, in all the stages. My partner, Avinatan Orr, and many other hostages will only be released in the second stage of their deal. I told the member of the Security Council this morning, we have no time. More than 500 days later, there are still 63 hostages living in unbearable reality, living in a nightmare, including my partner. Our life cannot go without them. Until all the hostages will be returned home to their families, my heart is still in captivity. I call to the international community not to abandon the hostages. I call for immediate release. Without immediate action of the UN, from the Security Council, of all the international organizations and government, we risk and we're losing hostages. More innocent people. I came here today to the UN to say, do not let the darkness win. Our hostages are still in hell. We must do everything to bring all of them home now.
Well, in Gaza, the second mass polio vaccination campaign has reached almost 548,000 children under the age of 10. According to the UN Health Agency, the WHO, that represents 92% of the 591,000 due to be vaccinated. The first round of this campaign, which started on February 22, was planned after environmental samples collected in December and January confirmed that the polio virus was still circulating. Dr. Rick Pippercorn, representative of the World Health Organization in the occupied Palestinian territories, spoke to journalists in Geneva via video link from Gaza, saying the current fragile ceasefire has allowed health workers to have better access to the population and access medical needs.
The total number of children under the age of 10, the target was 591,000. After 3 days of the campaign, over almost 548,000 children have been vaccinated. So this represents a coverage over 92%. We need to expand the medical corridors, but because we estimate that between 12, 10, and 14,000 patients, severe critical patients, are in need for medevac, of which roughly like more than 4,000 children. So it's absolutely needed that we expand the medical corridors, and that including the corridor to the East Jerusalem hospitals and the West Bank. There's almost 40,000 people displaced. I mean, what we get, the severe movement restrictions. And that is, of course, affecting all services, but very much including health. The WHO, what we try to support is pre-positioning supplies as much as possible in, let's say, key hospitals in the West Bank. Then also, there is always an ongoing trauma care program, which is also currently going, and trauma care training from community level all the way up to the third level hospitals.
Any cut in funding will have consequences on different programs of WHO. What we need to do from our side is really try to diversify funding, try to mobilize more resources through the platforms that have been created in past years during this transformation process, such as investment round, WHO Foundation, and member states, you will remember, have agreed to increase assessed contributions by 20% at the latest executive board.
In the meantime, the Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Sigrid Kaag, says the Middle East is faced with a historic opportunity to attain peace, security and dignity, as this may be the last chance to achieve the two-state solution. Ms. Kaag told the Security Council in New York that Arab states are leading the efforts to devise a plan for rebuilding Gaza, with Egypt planning to host a conference dedicated to Gaza's reconstruction, and pointed out that the UN is ready to support these efforts. Palestinian civilians, she says, must be able to resume their lives, to rebuild and to construct their future in Gaza, and stress that there can be no question of forced displacement.
But it presents a historical. The Middle East today is undergoing a rapid transformation. Its scope and impact remain uncertain, but it presents a historic opportunity. The people of the region can emerge from this period with peace, security, and dignity. However, this may be our last chance to achieve the two-state solution. Arab states are leading the efforts to devise a plan for the rebuilding of Gaza, with Egypt planning to host a conference dedicated to Gaza's reconstruction. The UN is ready to support reconstruction efforts. Palestinian civilians must be able to resume their lives, to rebuild and to construct their future in Gaza. There can be no question of forced displacement. We need to ensure, 1, Gaza remains an integral part of a future Palestinian state. 2, Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are unified politically, economically, and administratively. 3, there will be no long-term IDF presence in Gaza, and Israel's legitimate security concerns are addressed. We need to commit to ending the occupation and a final resolution of the conflict based on UN resolutions, international law, and previous agreements.
As a result of the ceasefire, the countries of the Middle East have an historic opportunity to reshape their region in a way that affords its people a better path forward. An expansion of the Abraham accords can lead to greater regional integration between Israel and its neighbors in a unified bloc to counter Iran and its state sponsorship of terror in Gaza, the West Bank, and throughout the region. The United States will do its part to create a more prosperous future for all of the region's people.
Our history is filled with wars that Israel promised will be decisive, and they were not. Of mass forcible displacement that was supposed to end the Palestine question, and it did not. The idea that more injustice, more brutality, more oppression would lead to peace is madness. The idea that more killing, more maiming, more displacing will bring security is delusional. There is no military solution to this conflict, only a political one.
Still, we hear statements that draw a parallel between Israel and Hamas, as though this is a symmetrical conflict. It's not. On one side, there are families holding on to hope. On the other side, there is an organization that murders infants and holds onto their bodies until it serves a political and propaganda purpose. Believe me, no matter what happens, our commitment to freeing all the hostages and completely eradicating Hamas is unshakable.
Forced displacement of the Palestinians from Gaza is both not acceptable, it's a violation of international law, and Palestinians themselves don't want it, and countries of the region don't want it. Gaza can be recovered and reconstructed. It is complicated, complex, but with political will and the right agreements, it can be done.
The end game in Gaza will be without Hamas. That is a given. Now there is negotiations about how to achieve that. We heard similar voices from the U.S. representative, and we are grateful for their words and their support. And I think the negotiators should also understand that we will not accept the end of the conflict when Hamas is still in power in Gaza.
Well, elsewhere, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced the government is pledging to increase defence spending to 2.5% of the GDP by the year 2027, up from 2.3%, the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War. He made the announcement to Parliament saying the UK will increase defence spending to 3% of its GDP in the next Parliament. With the new commitments, he says the UK will spend £13.4 billion more on defence every year. From 2027 onward, foreign aid will be cut from 0.5% to 0.3% in 2027 to fund the greater investment into defence. He said he was not happy about the cuts to foreign aid, but is hopeful that the investment into defence will manifest in British growth through jobs, skills and innovation. This comes as he is set to meet with the US President Donald Trump on Thursday in Washington, D.C. Security analyst Chidi Nwonu is joining us now to tell us more about this and to give us his perspective on this. Chidi, great to see you again today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Right. So what do you make of this announcement of the UK's increase in its defence spending?
Well, it's a long time coming. We should have had our defence spending increased a long time ago. I mean, the UK forces have declined in both quality and quantity for a long time. Immediately after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, British forces automatically started cutting down a lot of assets and capabilities, not just the number of soldiers, but assets like, some of our aircraft, patrol aircraft, strike aircraft, artillery. And it's been essentially just managed decline for a long time. Now, whilst we're in a relatively peaceful world, that could make a little bit of sense. But the moment that Russia invaded Ukraine, that was a wake-up call for Europe. That war had come back to Europe, and we needed to ramp up spending. So all of this spending increase should have taken place, since 2022 at the latest. So this is very much a case of better late than never. But the most important point here is not about percentages or the amount of money they're spending. It is what are the current defense priorities? Because it's all well and good to say you're going to spend 2.5% of your GDP, but that's a variable figure. If your GDP drops, then you're spending less money. If your GDP goes up, yeah, you've got more money, but what are you spending it on? There are many things that need doing in the British military, and what the government now needs to set out, which they should set out with the Strategic Defence Review, which is coming out in a few months, is what are the defence priorities and how they're going to fund them and how long it will take us to get there.
Right. Do you think it's strategic, coming just days before the Prime Minister is to meet Donald Trump on discussions that will center on the war in Ukraine?
But yes, that is the point. In that, and it's also the problem, in that, as I said, this should have been a sovereign decision by the United Kingdom, in 2022, when everybody could see that the world had changed. Everybody could see that this was now a new world where there is a war in Europe, a war in which we are very firmly on one side, and there is a risk that we could get involved in this war. We should have been bolstering our defenses ever since then. By timing it now, just a few days before he goes to meet Trump, whilst they consider this to be a projection of strength, I believe it to be a projection of weakness, because in fact, you're showing that you're unable to make critical decisions for your own country without somebody else putting pressure on you. And that, to me, is not a message that you want to send to either Trump or to Putin. This should have been something the United Kingdom was doing. I'll contrast it with Germany. Now, Germany takes a lot of criticism, but Germany very clearly did the two things that I just mentioned. They announced a massive increase in spending, and they also clearly stated what they were going to use it for. They stated they were going to create four more divisions, how they're going to structure them: 2 heavy, 2 medium. I think it was a heavy, a medium, and 2 light divisions, and the equipment and everything that they were going to buy in order to do this. So a clear message, unequivocal, and without the having to do it just before you go on a foreign visit.
And when was the last time that the UK made such a big increase to its spending on defense, and why?
So the last time was during the Cold War. So during the Cold War, back in the 70s and 80s, again, there were lots of defense cuts going on then. But after the Falklands War, defense spending ramped up, and the UK had about 4 divisions based in Germany with a military industry, a huge air force, a huge navy. We could talk about go into it in detail about the kind of depletion of British forces, but that was the last time that Britain was spending almost 4 or 5% or so on defense. Again, there was the focus then in that they had the Soviet Union across the border, and that was the big focus. But ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall, defense spending has collapsed. During the Iraq and Afghanistan war, defense spending climbed up a bit, but that was funding current operations rather than looking at trying to build a sustainable military.
This increase is now at the detriment of foreign aid. Could it have been avoided?
It could have been avoided by having a much more intelligent and detailed plan rather than trying to rush something through at the last minute. The biggest problem that, as I said, they've had is that people have always tried to cut defense. So the UK is in a strange situation where it's been cutting its defense consistently, as I said, for the past since 2008 or so. Yet it's been using its military for a variety of tasks. Now, British soldiers are deployed almost all around the world, conducting small training tasks, which in some cases are quite good and quite useful. But it's for a small army, it means that quite a small number of people are doing lots and lots of jobs. So not only are they reducing their force, they're overworking it and neglecting the key things that they should be focusing on, like combined arms training. So there are very few people left in the British military who have experience of combined arms warfare, or much less the UK having the equipment for combined arms warfare. So when you look at these issues and take them into all together, you'll see that the problem isn't a matter of increasing the defense spending or making these kind of announcements. There's deep structural problems in British defense, and one of the few ways that Britain kind of punched above its weight was in its development aid or its foreign aid. However, there's a misnomer there as well. that a huge proportion of British foreign aid was actually spent within the United Kingdom. I mean, it's a lot like, the issues or the nonsense that was going on about USAID and Boko Haram. A lot of what the USAID spends, is spent in the US, which is why now that USAID has been cut, there were huge swathes of American farmers or pharmacists and, drug manufacturers who are now in trouble because they had contracts. A lot of their production was tied up in supplying USAID. So the same thing for British foreign aid. So a significant proportion is used for housing asylum seekers in the UK. And then the other part that's used, for development aid is used to support British NGOs, British charities that go out to do this development work. A relatively small proportion actually reaches the countries that is targeted at. But even that small proportion is a good indicator of, is a good kind of selling point for the United Kingdom. It's a good way of the United Kingdom projecting power. So by reducing its footprint in the development world, the UK is losing a fairly interesting chunk of soft power that it used to have.
Right. So thanks again, Chidi.
Thank you.
Elsewhere now, doctors in the Indian capital Delhi have performed a life-changing surgery on a 17-year-old boy to remove his parasitic twin that was attached to his abdomen. A parasitic twin is an underdeveloped conjoined twin that relies entirely on the host twin for survival. They're extremely rare, with less than one case occurring per 100,000 births. The teenager, who had a fully developed extra set of limbs and a pelvis sustained by a chest artery, underwent a 2-hour surgery at AIMS Hospital in Delhi. Dr. Asuri Krishna, who led the team of specialists, said the surgery was particularly challenging because of the patient's age, adding that with insufficient medical literature to guide them, the team had to rely on their intuition, skill, and knowledge. Parasitic twins form when one fetus partially develops while attached to the other. In this case, the teenager had 2 fully formed legs, buttocks, and external genitalia weighing nearly 15 kilograms protruding from his abdomen. Remarkably, the parasitic limbs could feel pain, touch, and change in temperature. The surgery was done in 2 stages, first removing the parasitic twin, then extracting the cystic mass from surrounding organs. And the parents of an 8-year-old diabetic girl in Australia who died after they denied her insulin for almost a week have each been sentenced to 14 years in jail for manslaughter. Elizabeth Strauss had in 2019 been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and her family was told she would need daily insulin injections. However, her parents belonged to a religious sect known as the Saints, who oppose medical care. Believing God would heal her, she died from diabetic conditions, which causes a dangerous buildup of ketones, a type of acid and blood sugar spikes, at her home in Toowoomba, west of Brisbane, in January 2022. Her father, Jason Strauss, and mother, Elizabeth, were among 14 people convicted of manslaughter last month. The Saints leader, Brendan Stevens, has been jailed for 13 years by the judge at the Supreme Court of Queensland, who called him a dangerous, highly manipulative individual. 11 other members were handed jail terms of 6 to 9 years. As more than 150 countries convene in Rome from February 25 to 27 for the resumed session of the 16th United Nations Biodiversity Conference, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is calling for bold action to transform agri-food systems and support global biodiversity goals. Hosted a high-level meeting at its headquarters on the eve of the conference, the FAO emphasized that agri-food systems must work in harmony with biodiversity to ensure a sustainable future for both people and the planet.
The initiative provides us with a collective mechanism to help the governments build the capacity, identify, implement strategy levers across the agri-food system to achieve their national biodiversity targets.
If we shift the investment on agriculture that is destructive and we put it in agriculture that is socially inclusive and biodiverse, we will be making such a change in terms of the health of the planet.
From our side in the CBD, our message is very clear. Biodiversity is for us the foundation of food security and the foundation of nutrition. And agriculture as we know it, we believe, would collapse without healthy biodiversity.
So biodiversity provides the foundation for food production and providing essential ecosystem services such as soil fertility, pest control, and climate adaptation. Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Forum, adopted at the COP15, provided a common ground to work together. And over half of the framework's 23 targets are directly related to agriculture. We also need to increase the availability and affordability of financial service for biodiversity and agri-food system.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized that debt sustainability for developing economies will be a key priority for the country during the ongoing G20 finance meeting in Cape Town. The high-level gathering of G20 finance ministers and central bank governors is being hosted by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana and South Africa Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Nyango. It forms part of South Africa's G20 presidency, which is centered on the theme solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
This meeting today of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors will in many ways provide further substance and strategic direction in advancing this collective responsibility, I believe. The G20 finance track has been playing this vital role for 25 years. At crucial points in our recent history, it has been able to galvanize actions with significant impact. And it was this forum that in 2008 engineered the world's response to the global financial crisis, as well as being able to mobilize the necessary financial support to enable economic recovery. So the G20 played an important role in responding to the Eurozone crisis and in maintaining global financial support and stability during and in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Welcome back. Rwanda has condemned the UK's recent sanctions, calling them regrettable after the United Kingdom accused it of supporting M23 rebels in eastern DRC. Rwanda's foreign ministry adds in a statement that the sanctions do nothing to help the DRC, nor do they contribute to a sustainable political solution to the conflict. The UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office announced several measures, including suspending direct financial aid, except for the poorest Rwandans, halting high-level attendance at government events, and suspending defense cooperation. The US had earlier placed economic sanctions against Rwanda's Minister of State for Regional Integration, James Kabarebe, accusing him of playing a key role in Rwanda's support for the M23. According to Congo's Prime Minister Judith Tuluka, more than 7,000 people have died in clashes this year alone. Participants at a political meeting in Juba, the capital of South Sudan, have laid out plans for the next steps in the fourth extension of the country's ongoing transitional period. This comes after political security and civil society leaders ended a three-day consultation culminating in the signing off on recommendations. Speaking at the forum, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General and head of the United Nations mission in South Sudan, Nicholas Haysom, issued a stern warning that the time is running out to organize credible elections in the country. To push the process forward, key actors and stakeholders focused on three key areas: finalizing transitional security arrangements, advancing a permanent constitution, and electoral preparations. Co-hosting the event were the African Union, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and International IDEA.
There are many who argue that the failure up to now can be attributed to the failure of the international community to provide funds and resources for the elections. Well, I have to make it absolutely clear, there is not one penny that is coming for these elections if the South Sudanese don't indicate the political will to implement this electoral program. It cannot be, as some of them say to me, that the international community wants elections and democracy more than the South Sudanese. So people will look very closely at the steps which the South Sudanese are taking to demonstrate the political will and the desire to exit the transition that is so behind schedule. If this conference fails to produce any steps forward, it will only compound the sense of disappointment that people have. And with each sense of disappointment comes a loss of confidence in the political future.
While we are aware of these essential requirements, the willingness to practice these values seems to be absent. But it is important to note that we cannot continue doing the same things and expect different results. Hence, change must take place. Time for business as usual has elapsed.
It is good that we meet from time to time so that we assess the progress of that will lead us to free and fair and credible elections at the end of the day. But we'll make sure that elections are carried out.
The Under-Secretary General for UN Peace Operations has just concluded a visit to South Sudan. Speaking at a press conference in Juba, the capital, Mr. Lacroix, who described his tour as busy and constructive, urged continued support and commitment to South Sudan, especially as it enters a fourth extension of its transitional period, which began on February 22. The top UN official had sat at several high-level meetings in Juba, including with President Salva Kiir and First Vice President Riek Machar. He acknowledged the significant challenges that the country is facing as it struggles to show tangible progress in implementing the 2018 peace deal.
The key purpose of my visit was to convey an important message, actually the fundamental message, which is the continued support and continued commitment of the entire UN family to South Sudan, especially as it enters the fourth extension of its transitional period amidst a variety of challenges. We have spoken at length about current security and humanitarian concerns, intercommunal conflict, and the road to election as part of the implementation of the peace agreement, and vitally our ongoing efforts as the UN to assist the government of South Sudan in holding credible, fair, and peaceful elections in December 2026. There is also the impact of the Sudanese conflict on South Sudan, both in terms of the number of IDPs, the number of refugees, returnees, the impact on the economy, the potential impact on security in South Sudan. So obviously, the conflict in South Sudan is adding to the already existing domestic challenges of South Sudan. Completing a peaceful democratic transition is a common goal between South Sudan and the international community. And certainly, it's a goal that we share. But it is the South Sudanese themselves, and first and foremost, their authorities, who must do the heavy lifting. As the UN, we're here to assist them in every way we can on their journey to a permanent peace.
More than 5,000 musicians from at least 70 bands gathered in the city of Oruro, Bolivia on Saturday during the 23rd edition of the Oruro Band Festival, which this year is dedicated to the bicentennial of Bolivia. The massive brass band is conducted by Maestro Johnny Mamani, playing in perfect synchrony during the festival, which has already become a tradition of the Oruro Carnival. The festival started at 10 in the morning at the Civic Avenue, where the musicians performed the national anthem, the Oruro anthem, and the bicentennial song. Dancers also paraded, dancing to typical Oruro songs in the rhythm of the bands. The band festival opens the Oruro Carnival, which was declared an oral and intangible heritage of humanity in 2001, and is considered one of the most important festivals in Bolivia, attracting thousands of national and international tourists. That's our show today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.